little time to breathe before my kids wake up. But all of a sudden, it's 9 a.m., my kids are at school, and I'm ready to go to sleep, you know, and I don't remember it happening. It's just, it happens so quickly. And when we have these major life events that happen to us, sometimes because we're, you know, still, you know, when we're the heads of a household, we're so busy trying to keep it together that we don't have the time to really process what we've gone through. And so for me, that sort of plays into how my experience in writing this book. So I started writing The Cape House 8 years ago. My mother was diagnosed with cancer in March of 2008, January 2008, excuse me. I was pregnant with my first child. I was married about a little under a year, and my mother had said that she had stage 4 cancer and they were going to start treatment. So at the time, I lived in North Jersey and my mother lived in Manhattan, and so 3 days a week after I got out of work, I was a teacher at the time, I would drive across the bridge every day to go see her and talk with her, and while she was going through chemo. And eventually my husband and I moved up to our house. My family has a house in Cape Cod, that's why the book is called The Cape House, where I've spent every summer of my life, almost, in Cape Cod. So basically, we were planning, my entire family's from the Boston area, and so we had decided we wanted to move back up to that area to be around our people. So we were going to sit out the winter at the Cape House, and then in the spring move to Boston. So long story short, after a little over a year of treatment, surgeries, etc., my mother called me from Manhattan and said that the doctors had told her that it was not working. They were not going to be able to catch up with it, and she had, you know, a little under 2 months left. So she had decided that she wanted to move to the Cape House also, to spend whatever time she had left. So at that point I was living there with my husband and my baby, who was at that point 8 months old. So she moved in with my father. I have 2 brothers and a sister. They moved in with their significant others, and so we had this last 6 weeks together under one house.
This is the book.
So the day my mother called, the day my mother called me, and I already was a professional writer. I went to school for film and screenwriting. I got my bachelor's, and I got my master's in education, and I taught for a few years, and then I had a baby, and I was like, yeah, I'm done with teaching. So I, you know, had the baby at home, and I started writing freelance. So I was already a professional writer. And always wanted to write my own stuff, but didn't feel like I had anything to say yet. I was 26, 27 years old. What was so important about, what had really happened to me. But the day my mother called me, some instinct said, you need to write this as it's happening, because you're going to forget. And so every day, from that day until the week after Shiva, so that was about 6-7 weeks, I wrote. And I was describing this thing as it was happening. Not with the intention of, writing a book, although I'm sure in the back of my mind I thought, maybe this could be something. But with the intention of just processing this thing as it was happening and having something for myself to look back on later. So, so I wrote. And I had these notes after my mom passed away, and I didn't really look at them for about a year. And then I picked them up again, started tinkering with them, playing with them. Then I had a baby. Then I had another baby. And then I picked them up again, put them down again. And then all of a sudden, I just said, I picked them up. This was back in 2014. And I said, this is something. I need to play with this. So at the time, all I had really were these pages of the last 6 weeks of my mother's life. And I found that as I was editing and going through this, that there were stories that I needed to tell from before for this conversation to make sense. Or why would she say that? Well, I have to explain why she said that. And why do my parents call each other, my parents called each other Willie. That was their nickname for each other. Well, why? So I got to go back and tell that story. And I found that as I was going through what I went through, I had to go back and tell a whole other story in order to have this whole thing make sense. And it turned into a memoir about my life and my mother's life and how they interconnected and how it brought us to where we were at the end. And in doing so, you know, when my mother was sick in the last few weeks, she said to me, Rea, you write this. And at the time, I didn't really know what she meant. Like, did she want me to write it just about her illness? Did she want me to write about her life? You know, I had no idea. So I just, you know, I just wrote. And I found that our story had so many different elements to it, and it was only through writing what had happened to us together and what happened with us at the end that I really understood what we went through. I couldn't really certainly couldn't process everything as it was happening, and I couldn't even process it reading it later. I had to go back and really comb through everything. And you know, I won't give away too much, but I am what's called a compulsive overeater. I'm a food addict. So I used to weigh 250 pounds, and I wrestled with food addiction for many, 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 many years. And my mother, who wrestled with addiction herself, tried to save me. And if anyone has any experience being close to someone with addiction, you cannot save someone from addiction. They have to help themselves. But we did not know that at the time. And so it became a very complicated relationship. Me wanting her to help me, but resenting her for it. She wanting to help me and failing at it. You know, I get better, she gets worse. She gets better, I get worse. You know, but always with love there. We always, you know, it was always out of love. And I knew that. But again, I couldn't understand that until I looked back on what we went through. And eventually, when I did get better, I didn't realize until later that I would never have gotten better unless she had helped me. And I had to put those pieces together to see how the whole puzzle fit. And so that's how this book came to be. And I don't know if this is what my mother had in mind, but, you know, I did the best I could. And I found that through writing, it not only helped me come to terms with what I'd been through and losing her, but helped me appreciate what I'd had of her when she was alive. So I guess for me, like, this book is really, it's not just about, you know, honoring my mother, although it was. It's really honoring my own experience and giving myself the opportunity to look back on my own life. And, you know, my story, I don't think, is that much different than anybody else's. You know, we all have compelling stories. We just don't always allow ourselves the time to experience them because we're so busy, and to process what we've gone through. You know, there are so many things, and so, you know, just memories that make up who we are, these building blocks of who we are, the relationships we have that impact us, that sometimes we don't even realize until later. You know, in this book, I write about a teacher I had. I can maybe remember 4 conversations with that person, but one of them had a huge impact on me. You know, I haven't seen this person in 20 years probably, but I remember them. And, you know, but again, why would I think of them unless I was writing about it? And how would I know really what impact they had on me? And so, you know, part of my being here today is to really encourage everyone, I mean, you don't have to be a good writer, you know, and I don't even know what good writing is. I just, you know, writing is not just about other people reading it, but about getting it out and reading it ourselves. So if I may, I'd just like to read a brief passage from the book, just to give an example of you know, the book takes place both in the present moment of my mother's decline and in flashbacks at different points in my life. So I'd like to read a piece of a flashback, and then I would like to encourage you to join me in a writing exercise. So we'll read first, just to give you some inspiration, and then we'll go forward from there. So this takes place when I was 14 years old, and we went to Israel. So let me just turn to the page. I should know where this is, right? I wrote the book. I know, right? No, it's Amazon. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. I don't know if it was Mom's or Dad's idea to wake us up before the sun in order to climb a 1,300-foot rock plateau, but I hate them both for it. Sweat and dust cement together between my fat rolls, and my inner thighs are chafed raw. My lungs burn like I've been breathing ammonia. My shoelaces stretch tight against my swollen feet. As I hike the snaking upward path, my bones creak loudly enough for the dozens of tourists passing me to hear. I stare venom into their backpacks as they grow smaller ahead, like hairs to my tortoise. Dad doubles back to me, red-faced and puffing. "How's it going?" "Not dead yet," I snarl. We reach the top as dawn breaks. It takes me a good 5 minutes to catch my breath, by which time Mom is already in teacher mode, reading extra loudly from her guidebook. When the Jews revolted against the Romans in 66 CE, a team of rebels took the Roman garrison of Masada. Jewish zealots and their families fleeing from Jerusalem joined them on the fortress after the destruction of the temple in 70 CE. They held out there for 3 years, raiding and harassing the Romans who built ramparts and catapults below. A few people, hearing Mom's booming teacher voice, assume she is a tour guide and join our group. As she continues reading, we walk along the top of the plateau, passing the remains of old bathhouses, storehouses, and a mikveh, the Jewish ritual bath. I can see the Judean desert beyond, the waves of sand rising and falling, and the Dead Sea in the distance. In my mind, I rebuild the decaying rubble into a small city of Jewish rebels going about their daily business, while hundreds of feet below, the Roman armies build a ramp up the side of the mountain, trying to destroy them. The sky is light now as we enter the ruins of a synagogue. A frame of walls stands around us, half crumbled like a Lego project abandoned halfway through. Noah, Dina, Mom, and I sit on the broken foundation stones as Dad takes out his talit, his prayer shawl, and tefillin for the morning prayers. Out of habit, I glance around to see who might be staring, but then I remember we're in Israel, where almost everyone is Jewish. After Dad wraps his tefillin, he helps Gabe with his, placing the black wooden box at the crook of Gabe's forehead and fastening it with the attached leather strap. Gabe winds the other strap from his elbow down the forearm, just as Dad instructs him to, tucking the tail around his middle fingers. Once Gabe is set, Dad drapes his tallis over his head like a chrysalis, swaying back and forth in prayer. Gabe does the same, but more stiffly. I watch them pray, wondering if Gabe really believes he's talking to God. Dad does, but how does he do it 3 times a day with such concentration? Talking to someone who never answers back. I take the tourist pamphlet out of Mom's hand and continue reading where she left off. When the Roman 10th Legion was close to breaching Masada's walls with their battering rams and catapults, zealot leader Elazar ben Yair declared that all the Jewish defenders should commit suicide rather than fall into Roman hands. Led by ben Yair, almost 1,000 women, men, and children burnt down the fortress and killed each other. The zealots cast lots and chose 10 men to kill the remainder, until the last Jew standing killed himself. Only 2 women survived, later relating the event to the historian Josephus. Beside me, Mom gasps, "Look!" The sun creeps over the edge of the mountain directly behind Dad and Gabe, shining rays from their silhouettes in all directions like they're the center of a star. Mom takes out the video camera to record the light making its way slowly up their bodies, resting for a moment at their heads like a crown before lifting into the sky. At the Dead Sea, we slather our bodies in black mud and I burn my eyes in water too salty to sustain the basis form of life. After that, it's to Jerusalem, which looks like a new city built on top of an old one, with modern apartment buildings crammed against ancient stone houses. From the silence of the desert, Jerusalem is a boombox turned up high. There are shouting voices and car horns blaring, and the sidewalks swarm with people. We've barely put our bags down before Mom and Dad have whisked us to see David's citadel and the ancient artifacts under the old city. I'm so bored I consider eating a rock, so I'll choke and we can leave. Finally, we reach the Kotel, the western wall, which from the age of 5 I've been taught to turn toward while praying. This wall, the last remnant of the temple, is the holiest site in the world for Jews, who believe it was once God's dwelling place on earth. Now it's just a lonely wall of white stone, the afterthought of a conversation long over. Men and women split to each side of the dividing wall and approach the enormous stones. Many reach out to touch them, while others bury their faces in prayer books. Some cry. I follow Mom to the women's side, wanting to feel something as we walk up to the wall. I stare at the creamy rock, touching it gently with my fingertips, and am surprised to find it cold. Hundreds of notes, like wads of chewing gum, are stuffed into the cracks between the stones. I reach into my pocket for the note I wrote before we left for Israel and reread it. Please make me thin. I don't know if God will ever read this, if God is even there, but just in case, I fold up the paper and jam it into the wall.
Right.
So,
Wow.
thank you.
Such imagery.
Thank you. So, if you'd like, you can join me at the table and we can do a brief. Yeah, we have paper and pencils. Thank you.